Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today for our webinar on auto enrolment. My name is Andy Cowie. I'm the Business Development Director at James Cooper Creston, and I'm joined today by our expert, Mr. Nick Butler, from JC Payroll Services Limited.
Hi there.
Nick is, as I say, MD of JC Payroll, which is James Cooper Creston's dedicated payroll bureau. Nick has been looking after auto enrolment since before the early stages in 2013, so will hopefully be well placed to outline all that it means and appraise the options available to you as you stage. What I'd quite like to do, firstly, to make sure that you can all hear me, is just launch a little poll. Could you just let us know how many of you have already gone past your staging date and how many of you are yet to stage? Just give that a couple of minutes to come through. At least people are actually voting, so we know that you can hear us. Okay, thank you. So it looks like the vast majority of you are still yet to stage. Second poll, and we won't keep on bombarding you with these sort of things, but again, could you just give us an idea of what you think your current understanding of auto enrolment is? Okay, most of you stating that it's of average, and yeah, a few of you on poor, nobody good. So hopefully this webinar today will push those of you that are on average and poor up to those good and averages. Just a few little housekeeping rules insofar as, we are happy to take questions throughout the presentation. If you do have any questions for Nick as we go, please do type them in. We will try and take them as we go along. If there is a sort of a barrage of questions at any point in time, then what we'll do is we'll just address those at the end. So with no more ado, I'll introduce you and hand you over to Nick, who will take you through what we're here to do today. Nick.
Thank you, Andy, and welcome everybody. I do hope that you'll benefit from giving up your time today, where I will be talking about why we have this thing called auto enrolment. We will then go over the technical aspects. Now, whilst I'm aware that this session is not headlined as a technical briefing, it is important, I feel, that everyone understands what AE means to the employer, or at least appreciates that auto enrolment has quite high time requirements. Then we'll look at what options we feel out we can help our clients with, each very different, hopefully therefore something to fit all our clients' profiles. We will then conclude by looking at what we can do for you. So why are we where we are? The current screen is the original statement made by the pensions regulator way back in 2009. It gives you the legal reason why auto enrolment has been introduced. In fact, so much so that the pensions regulator is still using it today. But this doesn't tell us why the legislation was introduced. Quite simply, we have an ageing population, which has led not only to increased state pension costs, but also a quite considerable long-term care bill. The state cannot afford these costs now, let alone in future years, so something had to be done. You may have heard about the Australian model, and in fact that is the basis for how auto enrolment has been structured. In the early 90s, the Australian government introduced auto enrolment and pretty soon lost power as it was so unpopular. The initial contribution rates then were 3% employee and 3% employee, and 3% employer. 30 odd years later, auto enrolment is an accepted part of Australian employment, with employers contributing some 13%. So let's get into the facts. You have a question on the screen. It's not entirely true to suggest that all UK businesses need to enrol, but I guess it is fair to say that almost all UK employers will need to comply. That is apart from those listed on the screen. The TPR, as I'll refer to the pensions regulator, have taken what I think is a grown-up approach to small businesses, often director-only or director and spouse concerns. They already know that they do not want to comply with either the pension regulations, or indeed they may have a pension provision. More often they consider the business itself to be their pension. Now, I'm not saying that that's correct, but I am glad that the TPR has accepted that these setups exist, removing for many what I think would have just been a paper-filling exercise. Once you know if you need to stage, the next logical question is when. JC Payroll, like all good bureaus, have advised our clients of their staging dates, but the pensions regulator will write to employers both 18 and 12 months out from staging to tell them to start getting ready. If you do not know your staging date, you can find this at the TPR's website. The link is on the screen, but please note you will require your employer's tax reference number. So we've considered if you need to comply and when. The next question is how much will you need to pay? The screen is showing you the default minimum auto-enrolment contribution rates and also the default qualifying earnings, or the earnings that the rates of pay are based upon. Now, I don't use the term pensionable pay, and that will become apparent later. So these are the earnings between the National Insurance lower earnings limit of £5,824 and the National Insurance upper earnings limit of £42,383 per annum. The next screen shows how these earnings bands translate to a contribution. But before I do switch, I should point out that the contribution rates that are being shown are changes to the original rates and deadlines you may have seen in the past. These are delayed rates that are going through Parliament currently. So I thought some examples would help break up the facts. The main thing I think this slide shows is that auto-enrolment in practice and at the initial contribution rates in any case doesn't break the bank for the employee or the employer. And that has certainly been the message of relief from many of our clients. Also, you can see that as the contributions are based upon qualifying earnings, a higher earner like Joanne doesn't actually attract contributions on full pay as it's capped to £42,385. Out of interest, 1% on Joanne's full pay would have been £70.83 a month, so quite a difference. Employers can also base the pensions contribution on their own definition of pensionable pay instead of qualifying their earnings. However, for auto-enrolment, they only have 3 options or tiers. Now, the screen is giving you an overview of the tiers. It's a very busy screen, and I won't go into it in too much detail because I don't want to get bogged down in the detail. But just take a few moments to have a look at this. What I will say is if you choose one of the tiers, and therefore a definition of pensionable as opposed to qualifying earnings, you will need to register which tier you're using with the pensions regulator. We'll just take a moment to take that in.
And as we do that, just seeing we've had a question through with regards to whether or not we will get a copy of the slides. Yes, after this presentation, we'll make sure that these are sent on to everybody and they are made available as well.
Okay. So, employers can also, wrong place. Okay, so who do I have to enrol? Who do you need to enrol? Essentially, it's all people classed as eligible workers. They are not in an auto-enrolment qualifying scheme already. They are simply put aged between 22 and state pension age and earn over £10,000 per annum. This should, and in most cases does, catch most employees. There are also 2 other categories of worker. They are non-eligible workers and entitled workers. Non-eligible workers are aged between 16 and 75, earn below the £10,000 threshold, but above £5,824 per annum. These workers are not automatically enrolled, but they do have the right to opt in to an auto-enrolment compliant pension scheme. And if they do opt in, the employer must contribute also. The third category is the entitled worker. These workers are again aged between 16 and 75, but earn below £5,824 per annum. And they have the right to join a pension scheme, but it does not have to be an auto-enrolment qualifying scheme, and the employer does not need to contribute. Now, please don't worry, you are not alone if you cannot see the collation between the AE duties and the titles of these categories. For example, an entitled worker is actually not entitled to be auto-enrolled under auto-enrolment. These are simply the names that the government has decided to use. Recent changes in legislation have made it possible for employers to exclude certain workers from the assessment and therefore do not need to be enrolled. I think this is a very sensible update because it means that you, as an employer, can exclude anyone that's about to leave your employment through termination. That's either you've terminated or they've terminated with you, or through retirement. Also, and this was one that in the first 2 years caused a lot of problems, is if you have employees that have already hit their lifetime pension allowance and have therefore lifetime allowance protection in place, you can exclude them from automatic enrolment. We've had to be very careful in the last 2 years of people being automatically enrolled, because even if one penny goes into a pension pot as a contribution, when you have lifetime protection, that protection is lost and you have a considerable tax bill. But I'm not a pension person, so I'll leave that for now. Workers can also choose to opt out. Opt-out is not the same as leaving a pension scheme. You can choose to leave the pension scheme at any time, but opt-out is a name given to someone who says, I want to opt out of auto-enrolment itself, not the pension scheme. If you do that within 1 month of being enrolled, you'll get the first month's contribution back. After that timeline, you will not. One thing that I would say is very, very important is that an employer cannot be seen to coerce employees to opt out. It can lead to penalties from the TPR. What I will say is that whatever solution you choose, the pension company will write to the employee and the opt-out option will be given at that time. There is no need for you to do that. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but we have seen penalties from larger employers when they've considered to be opting or coercing opt-out. Oh yes, now what other duties do you have? The screen shows you recurring duties. I won't run through those, but it might just be worthwhile taking a little time to look through those. This just demonstrates that auto-enrolment possibly has less to do with pensions and more to do with admin and workload. There's quite a lot you need to do there. We'll just have a moment there. Oh yes. And if anyone else does opt out, you have to re-enroll them on the 3rd anniversary of the initial staging date. I think that's enough technical stuff now, and I do appreciate there was quite a bit to take in. Andy's already mentioned we're going to distribute the slides, so without further ado, let's consider who's going to do all of this, and that's the main purpose of the webinar. Okay, so since auto-enrolment legislation was passed in 2008, we at James Cooper Creston have been keeping a very keen eye on developments, knowing at some stage we'll be asked to help our clients. Auto-enrolment has been a strange beast, to say the least, as no one really knew who was going to do what when the legislation first came in. Payroll software suppliers were very slow to offer a solution, as they thought middleware solutions would prevail. Middleware is essentially a bit of software that sits outside of payroll and often outside of the pension provider, although sometimes it can be provided by the pension company, and the middleware handles the auto-enrolment admin duties. Again, many IFAs thought that the pension companies would do far more than they actually did, and have actually left the pension advice market altogether, and we've seen a lot of that. The good news is that now we're 2 years in and things have settled down. The market has a better understanding of what can be done and by who. The flip side is that there are hundreds of organisations out there all telling employers, you guys, that they're the best. Hence this webinar, which attempts to set out 4 very different solutions that we hope will suit all of our very broad client base in one way or another. What we're not doing is saying that these are your only options, and of course you may have already selected someone else and are just wondering if you could have done it differently, and of course that is fine. I think the big difference with auto-enrolment is that once you've chosen a provider or a solution, it just becomes pensions at that stage. You are free to change your pension provider at any time as long as you apply the auto-enrolment regulations. I guess our first solution is not a great surprise when you consider that we, as a professional organisation, would always want our clients to get the best professional advice available to them on any given subject, pensions being no exception. Therefore, if you do already have an IFA relationship, go and have a chat with them. If you do not already have a relationship with an IFA, or your existing contact no longer provides pension advice, which, as I say, we have seen a lot of, we would have no hesitation in introducing you to Chiltern Consultancy. Chiltern, led by their owner Mike Foster, have a wealth of pensions knowledge, and we've been working with them to help our clients for over 13 years now. The main benefits of using an IFA over any of the other options is that a whole of market IFA will work out what is important to you and your business when it comes to pensions, often looking at the requirements of auto-enrolment secondary to your strategic objectives. Indeed, an IFA will often start out looking at your pensions needs and end up looking at your wider business strategy to give much broader advice. But back to pensions. You will enjoy a close working relationship, and if you choose to, the IFA will give the message of what is happening and what it all means to your staff. This can be via group presentations or one-to-one meetings. It's a matter of choice and, of course, what you're prepared to pay for. The level of help you require is scalable, both in terms of what you want them to do and, of course, your budget. The IFA will have the highest price tag of our options, but I resist the use of the term most expensive, because that would only be true if the offerings were the same for all options, which they are not. Typically, you will pay upwards of £1,500 for the children's basic proposition. That would include the initial meeting, pension scheme selections, forecasting, etc. To give you also some idea of what a fully comprehensive solution would cost, the employer with around 15 staff, the screen confirms around £10,000. We've asked each of our solution providers to give a simple profile of who will like their service, and you can see Mike's quote now. Thinking about it, I think that does sum up my previous words quite well. I must have known Mike well. I'll let you finish that quote. Our next solution is a great compromise between acting with no direction and engaging with an IFA. Husky Finance have created an online system that asks strategic pensions questions and guides the employer through the selection process. They do not make the final selection, the employer does, but their unique selling point starts with the pension scheme they include in their offering. Husky started creating their auto-enrolment offering from the question, what is a good pension? With this in mind, they brought together a panel of industry experts, totally independent from any pension supplier, and asked them to look at the UK pensions market and list the good pension schemes. Out of 75 schemes, they returned a list of 9 pensions that they considered good, and these, together with some additional household names, i.e. Nest, the People's Pensions, and now that you may have heard of, form the basis of Husky's choice. Pension selection is the first stage of auto-enrolment compliance. Of course, the next is all the other duties we considered earlier. With Husky, these are all handled by Husky. So all you need to give them is a simple report each time you process the payroll, which we produce for JC payroll clients, and they do the rest. What's more, you can get this via a very simple fee structure, which you should be looking at now. Based on our market experience, not only are the setup costs low, but the monthly fee is very reasonable, especially when you consider they do all the admin. One thing that is true for auto-enrolment is that there are a lot of people making a lot of money out of what the employer needs to do. One point for confirmation is that on all of our slides we will state monthly fees. This assumes that a monthly payroll is being processed. If you operate a weekly payroll, these fees will be subject to change. To conclude on Husky Finance, let's consider who might like their option in their own words. I'll just give you a moment to read Brendan's quote. Okay. Our third solution is one that I think will appeal to a large number of our smaller clients. But we have learned that with pensions, as with many things, the size of an organisation does not always set the rules. Creative Auto-Enrolment is part of the Creative group of employee benefits companies, and as such, know the employee benefits and pensions market inside out. Using this experience of full service / IFA offering that they have, they've created a low cost but good compliant auto-enrolment solution which is a real alternative to the default options of Nest, etc. The creative solution has limited flexibility by design and is based upon the common features that full service clients chose when building a bespoke pension. And also the auto-enrolment legislation default settings using qualifying earnings as the measure of contributions. Creative have chosen Scottish Widows as their vehicle, and as one of the nation's most trusted life pension investment brands, you should be in good hands. But by far the biggest benefit is that there are no pension-related questions to answer at all, as they've all been made for you. Creative also do everything from setting the policy up to the day-to-day duties, so you don't have to worry about a thing. The Creative fee structure is also very simple, as is on your screens now. We also have a special offer from Creative until the end of March this year, where you get the complete solution for a one-off fee of £500 and then just £10 a month thereafter. I asked them if thereafter meant forever, and they said that was their intention. Okay. Finally, the solution will suit someone that just wants to be compliant, does not want to do the work themselves, and doesn't want to throw a lot of money at auto-enrolment because it's an imposed burden, but someone that doesn't want to just rely on Nest as the default option. We just consider that. Finally, we come to what most people consider the default option for auto-enrolment. Often wrongly considered the government scheme, we believe it should be considered on its own merits and not just seen simply as the default. Much of our knowledge on Nest is from direct feedback from clients and contacts in the industry that are using Nest as their chosen solution. In reality, we're getting a mixed bag, from very, very good comments to frustration that when help is needed, it's not readily available. The screen suggests a negative tone, but this is not intentional. I suggest that the biggest thing in favour of Nest is that it is the government and the pension regulators sponsored pension scheme. Therefore, you would hope it will be a very safe vehicle for auto-enrolment pensions. Nest has no employer fees, but it does have high fees for the pension pool, or in other words, for your employees. Now, all pension schemes have what they call an annual management charge, and typically for auto-enrolment, they're being capped at 0.7%. Nest make up their fees to the pension pot in two parts. A lower than average 0.3% annual management charge, and then a second part designed to repay the £600 million government loan. The second part is 1.8% on all new contributions into the pot each year, so a total of 2.5% of the cost of the pot is very high. The industry suggests this might be the case for many years, as the government thought the loan would be repaid quickly, as the large supermarket employers, etc., would use Nest. They did not, so the loan will take longer to repay. James Cooper Preston can register you as an employer for £200, and our JC payroll service clients have the administrative duties handled for £30 a month and just £5 per letter. In conclusion, it's likely to be someone that feels safe that Nest is the government and TPR promoted scheme that would choose Nest. From our point of view, it's likely to be a widely used scheme, hence its inclusion in our schedule. Now, Andy, I think you wanted to do another.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. I mean, very much a quick trot through four of the options that we think give a good scope of how much and how little involvement and how much money you want to be putting into this. Just a quick straw poll, based on what we've just said, what option would you consider would be best for you and your business? Interesting insofar as at the moment we're looking pretty much an even spread, to be perfectly honest, from those looking at maybe the IFA approach all the way then down to Nest. So, I think if nothing else, it kind of it kind of reinforces that this is very much a horses for courses, and people need options and need choice. What of course we will do is we will be creating. We've created a little leaflet which kind of summarises the 4 options that we have available, or we are kind of promoting or making you aware of, which we will be sending on to you after this presentation also. But no, thank you very much.
And I'd just like to add, looking at the results there at the poll, they are quite evenly spread, which is really good news, because actually I wouldn't promote one over the other. I think they're all very good solutions. Hopefully we've gone from top end of IFA, Nest being the default, and then 2 very different solutions in between.
Either that, or you're just giving people too many options now, and they go, I didn't know where I was before, and now I'm even less sure.
Well, let's hope not. Finally, what I'd just like to do as well would be amiss of me to have given this webinar without mentioning probably the finest payroll bureau in the world. And I have to be careful, we do have some clients on here today. I just want to touch upon JC Payroll Services, which is James Cooper Creston's payroll bureau. You will see throughout the webinar that we've created relationships, particularly with Husky Finance and Creative Enrolment. We've had a long-standing one with Chiltern in any case, but we're looking at maybe doing some joined-up fees with Creative and Husky, so that we can give people a one-stop shop for auto-enrolment and really try and take the burden away from people. The screen shows you some key stats and hopefully demonstrates that we're actually quite a major player in the bureau industry now. A quick Google search will let you know that there are thousands upon thousands of bureaus, often very small concerns. We are one of the higher end of the medium tier of BACS-approved bureaus, which, just to quantify, puts us at about in the top 75 bureaus for size in the UK. And really, I guess, just to finish off, if you'd like to know more about how JC Payroll Services can help you for payroll and or auto-enrolment, my contact details are there. A horrendous photograph, I have to say, but we'll have to have a new one taken. But thank you very much for joining.
And thank you very much, Nick. I think what I would also like to highlight at the bottom is the usual disclaimers, that the contents of this webinar, again, should not be relied on as giving sufficient advice in a specific case. What I would just like to echo is that Nick is available and happy to take any queries on anything that has been presented today. So before you go, let's say thank you very much for your time and for listening. We asked you at the beginning, based on your base understanding of auto-enrolment and options available to you, if we just rerun that again now, just want to see firstly whether or not Nick explains himself very well, and you've taken anything out. That's fantastic. I mean, so before we had a lot of average and a number poor. We're now on a 67% good and 33% average. Nick has done his job. Hopefully we're a little bit more aware of options. It is very much an option. We would very much like you to get in contact to help you consider your options. Doesn't seem to be any questions coming in. Probably a lot of information needs to be digested. So as I say, please do feel free to contact Nick. Thank you for your time. Thank you for attending. We as a firm run a number of these webinars over the course of the year, not just on payroll and auto-enrolment, but on all other aspects of accountancy, taxation, etc. Please do look at our website, jamescoopercreston.co.uk. Oh, and something's come in. Nick, okay, to do this via an existing pension scheme, do we need to set up something separate for those not already in a scheme?
Yes, so I'll assume that the existing scheme is an auto-enrolment qualifying scheme. If the existing scheme is an auto-enrolment qualifying scheme, you can then set up a new scheme for the workers that are not in the existing scheme. I think I've understood the question correctly there. Maybe if they can retype to make sure that that's answered the question, I've understood it properly. But what we're seeing a lot of strategy in pensions here is that companies, if you think about, we looked at the eligible, the entitled and the non-eligible worker. the eligible and the non-eligible actually can join an auto-enrolment compliant scheme. So you clearly, the two categories of worker need to have that scheme. And if you have an existing scheme, it has to be auto-enrolment compliance. So if you do have one, the first contact or the first point of call is the pension company to ask if it's auto-enrolment compliant. Now, we've had some fabulous reasons why existing schemes are not. A very common one is that it requires an application form, so you have to fill in a form to apply to join the scheme. Of course, auto-enrolment, this is...
sorry, we have a scheme in place. Can the opting in attach new people to this, assuming it is compliant?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. In essence, if you have an auto-enrolment compliant scheme, you can use that as the vehicle for auto-enrolment, correct. The employer does the work, i.e., or one of the solutions, should we say, will do the assessment and the auto-enrolment. The pension itself is just a pension vehicle. So if it's compliant, yes, you can use the existing one for auto-enrolment.
Hope that answers your question sufficiently, Jennifer.
Certainly got me out of the waffle.
Absolutely, because I don't know about you, but that was getting titled. Fine. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. If there are no more questions, I would like to thank Nick for his time, the team here for helping us pull that together. And we hope to speak to you, see you, and indeed address you at webinars in the future. Thank you very much for your time.